What,
Yeah.
what, what was his business model? How did he make all this money to buy islands and aircraft and mansions? How did he make all that money?
We're told blackmail, but I don't know if that's entirely true because he was involved in a $500 million Ponzi scheme, so $500 million Ponzi scheme back in the 1980s, and he didn't go to prison for that. There's people that deal in much less, minuscule amounts of dollars that are still in prison over those fraudulent transactions, and yet this guy's dealing in $500 million worth of Ponzi scheme. He's the head of it and gets a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
And that's a good question because I read the book The Spider. Jeff Epstein, The Spider, a great book. There's many great books. Whitney Webb has done a great job on that. Derek Brose has done excellent reporting on the whole Epstein saga. And it's one that really got me going down the rabbit hole to a lot of these things because when you start to see all these big wigs rubbing shoulders with the same individual, whether it's Prince Andrew, the ex-prime minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, all these same guys. And every time they get attached to this guy, well, I didn't know. They all say the same thing. I just didn't know. Um, it's very interesting. I mean, we're told that he was running a blackmail uh, operation, and that's how he was getting a lot of his funds. But we also, it sounds like he was with intelligence, with Mossad, uh, with the CIA. He was connected with intelligence. So that's another possibility where he got a lot of his money. And so that's where maybe that's some of that dark money comes from. And
Yeah.
so I where I don't know. I don't know if you agree with that. That's
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with the blackmail side of it
yeah.
because I mean that was the point behind my question. What was his business model? His business model was blackmail.
Yeah.
You get lots of young, attractive young girls, and you put them on an island, and you invite lots of prominent businessmen, politicians, senior people, and you don't tell these senior people that every time they go into a room with a young girl, usually under the age of, what's the age of consent in America? Is it 16 or 18? Something like
17 or
that.
17 is a minor,
Yeah.
18 is considered an adult.
So some of them were obviously younger than the
Oh
age.
yeah, they were 15s, 14-year-olds.
So you put a prominent businessman in a compromising position with an underage girl, and you film them because all the rooms on the island had cameras, hidden cameras. You film them. You now have a perfect blackmail opportunity. Okay, Mr. Businessman, we'd like an offer from you. Let's call it £1 million a month, and we won't release the film. Any failure to pay that money will result in the film being offered to certain websites in America who will be very interested in showing it. All right, here's $1 million a month. These are people who can afford that sort of figure. So it's a brilliant blackmail operation. There may well have been a lot of connection with intelligence who would like that sort of control over people. Oh, Mr. Epstein, would you invite so-and-so? I'm sure he'll enjoy your hospitality. And Mr. So-and-so is somebody that needs to be compromised. And so it goes on. And this is the unpleasant behavior. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen the interview with a person who was involved in this type of activity and how he was nearly trapped. To be honest,
You're not talking about the gentleman that can't sweat, are you?
no. That's tabloid fodder. That's Prince Andrew. You can't sweat.
Oh man,
Gave
that was
enormous,
absolute.
gave enormous publicity to Pizza Express in his
Yes.
local. Oh, it's a stupid story, that one. No, this was he was a banker, I think, in Switzerland.
Mm.
Name will come to me in a minute. Anyway, It's on YouTube. You can check it out. He was a prominent banker, and he was invited to several parties, which is, it's quite a normal event. People go to parties. Why not? And eventually he was being not propositioned so much as it was suggested it would be good for his career if he attended certain events, which are being private parties that were being held, given in big mansions, probably Switzerland, throughout Europe, maybe some in America. And he, as he describes it, he got progressively uncomfortable with what he was not only observing, but being asked to participate in, which was the abuse of children. I mean, talking children, we're talking below 10 years old. The abuse of them. And in some cases, the death of them, which he observed. He was being asked to participate in that. Now, once you're inside that, if you're trapped in that situation, you are now controllable, because any suggestion that you had participated would be the end of your career, probably the end of your life. So you're controllable. But he got out before he took part in any of the activities. And he's talked about it publicly, described it. He's quite emotional about it, because it would be a very emotional thing, especially if you have children yourself. He said, look, I have children of the same age. How could I possibly consider anything to abuse them? I wouldn't. So he got out. Luckily, he got out with his life, because that is the price you pay for crossing. And that is how the control is maintained. You're in a very compromising situation. You may even enter it without even being aware of the problem. But once you're in it, you can't get out. You cannot back out. You can't say, no, not interested anymore. Because then you will be targeted. Your career will be finished. Possibly your life will be finished if you start naming people. He didn't name people, but he described quite vividly what he was being asked to do. And given his emotional state when he described it, that was not acting, that was real. So there are ways of controlling people, and it's done in that sort of way. There are these secret societies. You've probably heard about the Skull and Bones and the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral.
Illuminati, the Boule, so many. The Freemasons.
Now, you've probably seen or heard the speech that President John Kennedy gave in I think it was 1961, early 1961.
Secret societies.
The secret society speech. He was very, very definite about what he said, secrecy is abhorrent. Secret societies will have no part in anything I am able to control. Because he was very admired. I admired President Kennedy. I followed from his inauguration. I thought, here's a man that radiates honesty. He radiates good intentions. He was a politician who couldn't be controlled, apparently. That's why
he did have a history of being a womanizer as well, and
he did.
And then you have his family ties to the mobs, so he had made some enemies. I feel like all these guys are selected, not elected. I don't buy it. I feel even currently with our politics right here, I think a lot of it is political theater. You may disagree with me, but I feel like it's political theater where Trump is being made to be a victim and a martyr of the system. The election was rigged and stolen from him last time around, and now they're bringing up these goofy charges against him. Poor old me, and it's being set up so that he wins. And then they just pass the same stuff. Nothing changes. I mean, they talk about 9/11. I mean, we were talking about Jeff Epstein. Trump was asked, would you declassify the remaining JFK files? He said yes, without missing a beat, even though he didn't do it the first time around, but this time he will. And then they asked him, will you declassify? So it was the JFK files and, September 11, 9/11 files. Yes, without missing a beat. Will you declassify the Epstein files? Yeah, that's one we got to be a little bit careful with, blah, blah, blah. And why did he say that? Because he's named in those damn documents, and he's involved with that stuff. So it's pretty clear why he hesitated to answer a definitive yes for the Epstein question. All the other questions, definitive yes, no pause, nothing, yes, yes, yes. Epstein, yeah, I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you on that one.
But there's an interesting story about Epstein and Trump, because Trump, given what he was doing prior to being a president or being the president, he was a very successful businessman. People will say, oh, companies went bankrupt. And no, yeah, they may have gone bankrupt. Companies do go bankrupt if they do the wrong things. He was also a prominent television personality. He was the instigator, the creator, and the main participant in the American Apprentice. We have the same program in the UK with Lord Alan Sugar, as the Trump "you're fired" person. So Trump was a very prominent person, very prominent in New York.
Mr. Allen, I guess I've been told that your volume is a little bit low. Is there any way to increase it a bit? That was from our friend, Mr. Williams.
I got my volume on
max all the way.
This end.
I hear you just fine on my end, but it's the listeners.
Let me just get a bit closer to the microphone. Maybe that would help. Here's a microphone. Quite small, but it works.
Mr. Williams said that we are off topic.
Oh, we're on topic. You see, there's a lot on topic these days, aren't there? No, and that's why, I mean, you're not controlled, are you?
No, I love this. I love that we can jump around from topic to topic to topic. But yeah, it sounds like they're having a hard time hearing you on your microphone levels.
I've got the built-in mic set to maximum. Let me just increase it a bit here. Built-in microphone. How's that? Oh, no, it's not the built-in microphone I'm using, is it? I'm using the... I've set the volume on the mic as high as it'll go.
I can hear you fine, but I suppose it's the folks listening. You know, if you're listening to this live and you miss some parts or whatever, I'm going to re-edit this, and it will be a better polished product afterwards. So I wouldn't.
That's good. It's worth listening to. I'll tell you.
It is. We've covered quite a bit, and
you just started. Come on, Weezy. There's lots to go.
Hell yeah. I mean, so we covered the moon landings, we covered Egypt. What's another rabbit hole that's one of your favorite ones that you think is probably less well traveled?
Let me just before we finish the moon landings, here's a piece of moon rock. How do I know it's a piece of moon rock? Could I say it's a piece of moon rock?
It looks like a weed brownie, if I'm being honest.
You can't eat it. No, it's a piece of. It's technically it's called a breccia, which is an accumulation of volcanic rock, which we're told the moon has. I got that about 20 years ago. About 20 years ago, you may recall an event in America where a gentleman walked into the laboratory or the office in Houston, where the moon rocks, all 382 kilos of them, were being stored. They were stored in a big filing cabinet. not in the air-conditioned rooms that we see them in now. And he got his little trolley, got the filing cabinet on the trolley, took it out to his pickup truck, put the filing cabinet in the pickup truck and drove away with the moon rocks. And of course, NASA went a bit spare about this and decided they better get them back. And they found out what had happened, and they traced the man who did it, and they got the moon rocks back. Well, they got some of them back. That's one they didn't.
It looks like a delicious morsel for sure.
Oh, it's good. It's lovely. It's a lovely piece of moon rock. That was given to me when I completed a presentation I did in London about 20 years ago. This gentleman is American. He came up to me afterwards. He said, "I liked your talk." I was talking about the moon landings, not as comprehensively as I do now. He said, "I like your talk. I think you might find this interesting. Here's a piece of moon rock for you." And he gave it to me, walked away. I don't know if it's connected with the theft of the moon rocks a couple of years earlier. I don't know if it wasn't. And nobody can prove it one way or the other, can they? So a piece of moon rock. No private citizen is supposed to own moon rocks. It's property of the American government. And there's another very sad story of an elderly lady whose husband worked for NASA. I don't know where she worked. It could have been Houston. It could have been Florida. And her husband had been given a piece of moon rock through his work, a tiny little piece, just like a grain of rice. And this lady wanted to know if she could maybe raise some money by selling it. So she contacted NASA and asked them, "I've got a piece of moon rock. I'd like to sell it. Would you like to buy it?" Or was that effect? And they agreed a meeting with her in a coffee bar somewhere. And she was there, and NASA, she thought, turned up with the FBI behind, and they arrested her for possessing American government property. She was stripped, searched. I mean, this is an old lady in excess of 80 years old. You don't treat them like that. She got to the point where she actually wet herself. She was so frightened. This is not something you should do just because you are claiming to have quite legitimately have a piece of moon rock, which her husband, as later discovered, was presented with as a result of his work for NASA. So that is the sort of action that you can expect if you own a piece of moon rock. Okay, guys, here it is. Come and get it.
I love it.
That's my story of the moon rock.
So let me ask you this. I know, for our side, anyways, explanations for moon rocks would be unmanned craft.
Yeah.
And we also can't forget that you can get moon rocks from asteroids, that land here. I think, and you read David McGowan's book on Wagging the Moon Doggy. He talks about how it's funny how there's been instances where moon rocks were found out to be petrified pieces of wood, and then when that was discovered, then weirdly enough, the rest of the moon rocks went missing. No one knows what happened to them, and you would have to assume, if that's the case, that people didn't want to go through another embarrassment, such as getting petrified pieces of wood. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a lovely story, that one. 2009, that happened. The moon rock was on display in the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, in Holland. That's basically the National Museum of the Netherlands. It's a lovely museum. I visited it because contained within that same museum is one of the great paintings of the world. It's called Night Watch by Rembrandt. And it's a Dutch national treasure. It will never leave the country. It's a huge painting. It has its own room, and it is a very, very impressive piece of work. That's what the Rijksmuseum. So just Google Night Watch, anybody, and you'll see an example of it. It's an incredible painting. Anyway, in the same museum, they were doing some renovation work, 2009. And one of the areas they were renovating was the space exhibits. And they had on display a piece of moon rock, similar in size to my piece of moon rock. And it said moon rock, presented to the then Dutch Prime Minister, a Mr. Dries, I think his name was, by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins during their visit to Amsterdam during their Great Leap World Tour in August 1969. Now, anybody with the slightest interest in Apollo will know that that couldn't possibly be true, for the very simple reason that the moon rocks were all in quarantine, assuming they came from the moon. The story goes that they were put into the receiving laboratory at Houston, and they were going to be stored there. And no moon rock prior to that date had ever been given to anybody, let alone the astronauts. Moon rock was given to every American state by President Nixon, who was president at the time of the alleged moon landings. We know how much he was on the side of truth, honesty, and decency, but that's another story. Nixon ordered that every American state should receive a piece of moon rock, and that 160 countries would also receive a piece of moon rock. Now, anybody saying moon rock will think of something like that, you know, sort of a rock that weighs about 200 grams. No, what was presented was no bigger than a grain of sand, almost invisible. I've seen the one we got in London. It's in the Science Museum in London. It's a grain of sand encased in plastic. It says moon rock on it, presented by the United States government on the occasion of the moon landing, or worse that effect. Now, you probably got one in Florida. Have you seen it?
I've been to the Kennedy Space Center.
Okay. Have you ever seen something called moon rock?
No, I haven't seen it. Maybe I did, but I just don't remember. It was a few years back.
Okay. As I say, every American state is supposed to have it. But the trouble is that most of them can't find it. Gone, it's vanished. It's lost. Most countries can't find their own piece of moon rock.
Yeah, that's what David McGowan was saying in his book, that
it's true.
It can be found. And so that's what makes me posit that people didn't want to suffer that same fate of embarrassment, you know.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah,
now, at this point, somebody will probably say, but the moon rock has been examined by universities and research institutes around the world. Yes, they have, we're told. Now, who paid for the examination? Because you know that money only pays salaries. NASA financed the investigation of every university investigating moon rock. And they were sent a piece of moon rock in a box marked moon rock. And they were also sent a piece of Columbia River Basin moon rock, rock. And from Hawaii, same thing. And the instruction basically was compare and contrast these different types of rock. What are they going to say? They're going to say the moon rock isn't moon rock? No, of course not. If they want to get paid, they're going to say, oh, it's a good piece of moon rock, this. Yeah, it's very different from Columbia River Basin volcanic extrusion. It's very different from Hawaii volcanic extrusion. It's a piece of moon rock. It could only come from the moon. It confirms NASA's story. It's the same story with these stupid reflectors. You don't need a reflector to get a reflection back from the moon.
Yeah.
It's the same as the there are no waving flags on the moon. Quite right, there are no waving flags on the moon. There's no atmosphere to wave them. But you can calculate the gravity at which they're waving. And when you do that, you find they're waving on Earth. So NASA's story is falling apart. And you've already mentioned the Artemis program, the fact that they can't even get a rocket off the ground without blowing up the launch site, which is what happened on Artemis 1. It almost destroyed the launch site. Elon Musk does the same thing. First time he launched his super heavy, rocket, it almost destroyed the launch site. And there's a film of a large lump of concrete from the launch site of Musk's big rocket destroying a car half a mile from the launch site. What's the car doing half a mile from the launch site to be destroyed? You see the rocks being flown into the Atlantic Ocean because they're relatively close to the sea. The whole thing destroyed it. They had to rebuild the launch site because they forgot one thing. When you see NASA rockets taking off, you see great clouds of steam, and you assume, well, that's the exhaust of the rocket. No, it's steam from the water being pumped into the deflection trench underneath the rocket to deflect the exhaust. It's the water being pumped in to cool the exhaust and to make sure that the whole launch site stays in one piece. There's huge amounts of water. That's why you see so much steam. And that is why anybody who wants to know about launching rockets on the moon itself, the ascent stage of the lunar lander, in which the two astronauts were supposed to be strapped in, they weren't strapped in, they were standing quite unsupported. That fired a rocket, 3,500 pound rocket, to take off. Now, 3,500 pound rocket is not a small piece, it's not a small firework. It's quite a big piece of kit. Yeah. 3,500 pounds is nearly 2 tons of thrust, because the thing weighed about 2 tons by the time it hit. So that's why you need it. There's nothing underneath that rocket for the exhaust to go. There's no hole in the ascent stage, which was basically the launch site. There's no hole there, because directly underneath the ascent stage rocket is the descent stage rocket and all the fuel tanks for it. So where did the heat go? Rockets are not known for their cool temperatures. It would have just heated up and probably heated the astronauts inside the ascent stage, certainly their feet, because they were within inches of this rocket. So it's such a fabrication, and NASA made so many mistakes, which have now been uncovered. At the time, we didn't know half this. We didn't have the information. But we now
don't they talk about the heat being around 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit? I'm not exactly sure what it is in Celsius, but 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, which is so hot that water just boils off and it's evaporated, vaporized, for lack of a better term. And so this shielding that they, this little gold foil is supposed to be the end all, to their problems. It's so hilarious.
Yeah.
Again, Dr. Raza would argue that pointing out the lunar lander is a one of those moments. I agree.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to pass up the opportunity to laugh at that thing. I mean, you can take pictures of it. I saw a meme, someone posting like, when my kids grow up, I'm gonna tell them this was a spaceship. And they didn't even edit the damn thing. It was just a picture of the lunar lander, and you can see the rivets. I mean, it's so cheesy. I really don't know how if you pride yourself in critical thinking and, questioning and scientific, how the hell you could look at something like that and not even bat an eye? And let's not forget about the way it took off from the moon, with the camera panning up, and we're told, whoa, they already knew to delay it 3 seconds. I mean, come on, man. Like, how stupid does one think they are? But a lot of people still believe it. A lot of people still get angry and upset if you question any part of it. So, I mean, there's still a lot of work to do. But I disagree. Dr. Roz is a good friend of mine. I disagree with him in that he feels if people admit, or I'm sorry, I think it's Bart Sabro. I may be confusing. Bart Sabro says that if it is admitted by the government that we didn't make it to the moon, things would be a lot better. I disagree. I think it'd make things a lot worse because people will start to wonder, what else are you lying about? Did you guys lie about the Kennedy assassination? Did you guys lie about 9/11? Did you guys lie about this pandemic, quote unquote? What else are you lying about? you know? So I think it would, I don't know. I want to say I would be hopeful to want a revolution because I think one is needed. I think our government is corrupt to the core. I think it was founded on great principles, freedom of speech, uh, the right to bear arms, and you're seeing it constantly attacked, and we're given bogus reasons to justify these attacks on what the founding fathers wanted. But then again, you go back and you can point through to many parts of history where the Constitution's never been followed. It's always been skirted around. It's just a nice piece of poetry that was written. Um, I will say that our freedom of speech laws are light years ahead of what unfortunately is in your neck of the woods. You have this thing called malicious communications, which as an American is like, what in the world are they talking about with this malicious communication? And yeah, it's ooh, someone. Does Scott want to jump in? Should we get Scott to jump in?
Yeah, let's get Scott. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Scott, you want to jump in, buddy? Let's see. Yeah, if you have any thoughts, I'll try to add them as you speak. But yeah, how do you feel about the way things are going? I know I mentioned that. So my gut feeling is that I think I'm not saying the world's gonna end. I'm not religious. I don't feel like the end is nigh, any of that stuff. But I do wonder if we are heading towards an end of civilization, an end of, or not civilization, an end of the American empire. I stated before that the average empire lasts between 150 to 300 years. And with all the madness going on, I can't help but wonder if this is what it feels like when you're heading towards the end of empire, where things are just batshit crazy everywhere you look.
It's an interesting study was done quite several years ago, looking at exactly this area of empire. And if you go back 3,000 or 4,000 years, what was the most prominent civilization then, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago? It was China and India. That was in the East, or we call the East. So far as China's concerned, they were in the center. China were a very, very powerful country. It's quite a big country, a lot of people there. It's still quite a big, powerful country. But 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, it was a very powerful country then. Then things started to switch. And if we go into more modern times, we can look at the Indian Empire, which is a very powerful empire. That's where the Taj Mahal came from. Probably the greatest building ever created. It's a beautiful thing. if you've ever seen it. Even pictures of it are good. But to actually see it physically and touch it close up, which I've done a couple of times, it's a wonderful, extraordinary building. The technical ability to put it together 400 years ago was vastly in excess of anything available in Europe. Then the European Empire started, the Portuguese Empire, the Spanish Empire, the French Empire, the German Empire, the British Empire. And you say they lasted about 200 or 300 years. That's about right. The British Empire basically started in about 1750 and lasted through to about 1950, when America took over. There's nothing called the British Empire available now. It's called the British Commonwealth, which is an incredible organization. People want to join the British Commonwealth. There are 56 countries within the British Commonwealth. And 16 of those countries still recognize our monarch, currently King Charles, as head of their state as well. Because we have calmed down, we're stopped invading people and tried to cooperate and to make things better for as many people as possible. Now, I asked the question some time ago, we have been talking a while now, why do you speak English in America? And the answer is actually quite straightforward. When the founding fathers were creating their incredible document, the Constitution, they had various other questions to answer. One of them was, what should be our common language? Should it be French or should it be English? And at the time that was voted on, there were 13 original states. And they took a vote. And the vote went 6 votes to French, 7 votes to English. And that's why you speak English in America. And that, in my view, is our ultimate revenge on you chucking us out when you didn't like what we were doing.
I love it. I would argue that the revenge was so what I would deem as the earliest official American conspiracy is known as the Newburgh conspiracy, which coincidentally didn't even take place in Newburgh, New York. But it happened a short time after the Revolutionary War. Some of the bankers wanted to move in. All right, we kicked the redcoats out. So let's make our own banking system. And it was modeled after the Bank of England style.
Yeah, it was.
And then you had George Bush. You had George Washington say, this is the official story. I disagree with it. There's Scott. What's up, Scott?
Hi, Scott.
Good afternoon, sir. It must be late for you, Sir Marcus.
Oh, it's about midnight over here now.
Yeah.
That's all right.
We're having a great time. We're hitting all kinds of rabbit holes tonight.
Yes, sir. We sure are.
Oh, we done it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just funny. My computer jumped up and gave me a notification that you were live, and probably an hour or so into it when it showed up. So
Wow.
but at least it got to me.
And there are things you want to add, aren't there?
Oh, I was just listening quite intently. You guys were covering a wide range of topics.
That's
I
true.
mean, you pretty much solved everything in the world at this point.
Yeah, that's right. We have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen to us, guys. We know the answers. You got the questions. We know the answers.
But you
Trust
keep
the experts.
you keep showing that moon rock, and it's looking better and better. It's a better copy of anything NASA's got now.
I know. Come on, NASA. Do you want it?
Yeah.
It looks delicious. It looks like something William Randolph Hearst would be opposed to very strongly.
Oh,
Well, let's start the bidding on it, shall we? See which country wants it. Maybe China wants a cut piece of that one.
Oh, they probably would. Actually, one thing I just want to go back a little bit with Wheezy. You mentioned William Randolph Hearst, a big
Yes, sir.
magnate that Orson Welles portrayed rather grotesquely in his famous film, Citizen Kane. William Randolph Hearst was a big newspaper publisher. At the time, newspapers were published on wood, on basically wood pulp, which doesn't have very long threads. At the time, early 1930s, people had discovered how to create paper from hemp. You mentioned hemp as being prominent within the American agricultural community at the time, which it was. William Randolph Hearst had just bought 7,000 acres of forest to feed his paper pulp mills. And he couldn't have the newfangled defibrillator that was being developed to create pulp from hemp, because hemp was an easily grown crop, grows very fast, grows anywhere. So he decided to make a film which was called Reefer Madness. Now, if you've ever seen the film, it's available. You can get it on YouTube now. Reefer Madness. Reefer as in reefer, madness as in what will happen if you do your reefers. And that was to demonize this strange new drug called marijuana that had been flooding in from Mexico. And it was harming the American people. And that's why they wanted to demonize it. And the film does a very good job. The trouble is, it didn't work because people knew pretty soon what was going on. But William Randolph Hearst, as you mentioned, was the created yellow journalism. I had the sort of tabloid type headline, plane found on the moon or Elvis in bed with Marilyn Monroe, that sort of thing. Yellow journalism. And he wanted to maintain his paper mills, hence his attack on marijuana, which nobody knew what it meant.
Well, that's why he named it marijuana, though, too, because it sounded Spanish and foreign, and he could, it sounded exotic. And when Black people and Mexicans use marijuana, it made them want to rape white women. And that's the trope that he pushed with his yellow journalism. And that's something that stuck for many decades later. I mean, damn near a century later. Yeah. And there's still people that are scared of this herb. And when you ask them why, they really don't have a good answer for it. Well, that's the way I was raised to look at it. Completely ignoring the strength of the fibers, the medicinal uses, along many other uses. It was simply a competitor to Mr. Hearst's empire, and he went out to try to eliminate it as best as he could.
Indeed, yeah. It's a tragedy. It's one of the great tragedies of the 20th century.
Yeah.
That was a diversion. Sorry, Scott, we got diverted a bit there.
No, I was going to ask you if you understood the word colitis, as it's referred to, and is that common in New Mexico or?
Colitas means little butts or little tails.
Yeah, little butts.
Yeah, I knew. I was like, I don't know if you're saying it right, but apparently you are.
Yes.
Yeah, little buttocks.
I'm trying to think of the song that it was referred to in. It escaped me at the moment, but
I like little colitas, and I cannot lie. It was a song. Oh no, it was big colitas. Yeah, someone was asking. I think before we brought Scott in, we were talking about the 3-second delay to the moon landing. Based on your guys' research and expertise, is that a reasonable number, for the 3-second delay? Because one of the damning videos that I feel Bart Sabrell received through the Freedom of Information Act was that video where they're quite visibly showing that they are engineering a sphere, through the window, an optical illusion, if you will. And as the astronaut is communicating with dispatch, a third voice chimes in and is counting down 1, 2, 3, 4, speak.
Yeah.
That delay, is that a realistic thing, or would the delay be more? And then the technology. I mean, there's a lot of people that have questions, because how the hell, with analog tech, were they going to be able to relay live transmission down to Earth? What are your thoughts on that?
I believe the official number is 2.4 seconds, 1.2 seconds each direction. On the thing, I think they do better with analog than they ever would with digital. There's no way they're going to line it up when they're moving like that. It's just not possible. Of course, if you look at the documentation, it's going from digital to analog to digital, back and forth again all over the place, right? And then they're bouncing it off everywhere around the planet that they're picking up as well. And of course, there's going to be delay there too. But to physically operate the camera that's going to shoot the liftoff of the vehicle from the rover, I mean, that in itself is just pure fantasy. I mean, you imagine somebody looking at a delayed video and trying to operate a joystick to operate that camera. It's just unreal.
And how is the camera tilted up or panned upwards? Because that's what you see in the film. The camera follows the craft as it takes off. How is that panning physically done on the camera, on the lunar rover, separate from the lunar lander? Obviously, it was several hundred feet away. Was it being directed direct from Earth? And if so, what signal was being sent and how was it received on the rover and converted into electrical signals to pan the camera up? The camera couldn't pan up, we know, certainly not mechanically. So, as you say, Weezy, the whole thing is a fantasy.
Yeah, if you look at the launch on it, you see it pan up and then it kind of pauses and waits for it a little bit and then catches up to it again like that, and then starts to zoom in. I mean, that's all manually operated, and having a digital signal, any movement on the rover that's going to make it move around at all, you're going to lose your signal. You're not going to be lined up well enough. Yep. Doing it, even the camera, if it was moving like that, would jar the thing. You'd lose the signal right away. I mean, bad enough you got to call the guy here on Earth to line up your satellite dish, right? Because the wind's blowing it around a bit. Imagine who they had to call on the lunar surface to fix their problems, right?
Ghostbusters.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, and you see them on that live TV camera on the rover, and they kneel on it, and the whole thing jostles around.
Yeah.
Well, there's no way you're going to line that up, and how long? Even if they could do it, how long would it take? And here's the other thing: everything is in transcript. Everything is in audio communication and transcript. Where is the conversation they were having with NASA to line this up? And of course, how could they have the conversation if they lose the signal? Because that's their video and audio communication all at the same time gone.
Yeah.
Okay, if they lose it, how are they going to have the conversation to line it up?
Not. There are so many holes in NASA's story. There's so many inconsistencies, unexplained details, anomalies, but NASA will not address them.
Yeah, that's the same thing with taking off from the lunar surface into orbit and connecting with a vehicle that's traveling 6,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, faster than any bullet fired from a gun.
I mean, they never did it before. That's number one. And even if they said, "Oh well, we practiced," in low Earth orbit, putting the two vehicles together, that's still not true. You would have to have one orbiting the Earth and another one taking off from the ground and connecting with it. And they never did that. And they never practiced that. Okay? But the amount of communication, the amount of timing, everything else, when you're looking at a vehicle that's crossing the lunar sky, they had communication, I think, for 22 minutes on every orbit. It's going to take 7.5 minutes to get up to that orbit on there. So you got 3.5 minutes that you can decide whether you're going to take off or not. When they come into communication, by the time you're going to have to hit launch to get off the lunar surface, or they're going to pass you by. You're going to have to wait for the next revolution. All the math has got to be done at that point. You're not sitting level. You're not sitting on a launch pad. Your attitude is not vertical at that point. None of them are, right? You're going to fire a rocket and you have no idea exactly how much thrust it is because they're hand-built, never been fired before, right? Yep. Maybe it's 3,500 pounds of thrust. Maybe it's only 34.5. Well, it's going to slow you down. Then you don't know exactly how much weight you've got. You're just dumping this stuff out. You put 100 pounds of moon rocks on, those rocks you have, Marcus. And, those kind.
These moon rock, like all the way from...
They hand those out at Halloween, don't they? But I mean, you've got all of these things. Now, where is the conversation in the transcript to do all of that? Where's the math? Where are the computers that are capable of doing it? I mean, they had like 40 guys sitting in a room with slide rules to confirm anything they were supposed to be doing. Because it's way faster than... Those 40 guys were way faster than any computer out there. And more accurate. Yep. Right? But then they got to send that information back to that crew. Then they have to log it into an antique computer where you're going to have to hit the button, hold it for 15 seconds to hit the reset before you can put the next piece of information in. People don't understand that. Yeah. You wait 15 seconds to flatline that, to wipe the memory off before you can put the next piece of information in, and you're only putting one piece in. All right? This is where the problem is. This is where the fantasy occurs. Okay? And if they did have a computer that size, it would weigh more than all of the other equipment that they so-called took there. Right? And you still need 40 guys to operate it. So never
Scott, I have a question for you.
Station.
Well, you're very technical, so I wanted to ask you. I brought it up with Marcus earlier, but today I watched a 30-minute video from 1966, and they're giving a tour, if you will, of the lunar lander, explaining what this works for. And this is 1966. The astronaut, one of the astronauts that's giving the tour, is wearing this suit that looks like, I told Marcus, he looks like he just left Bohemian Grove. It doesn't look anything like the finished product of the astronaut spacesuits. And so one of the scenes, they're showing the lunar lander. They're saying, this is where we practice how to fly the lunar lander. It's able to hover. They make it sound like it's a helicopter, but they're using cables to simulate it. I'm like, why do you need to use cables if you can fly this thing like a damn helicopter? Why are you using cables? And so, well, there was one thing I wanted to ask regarding that, and I'm gonna send Mr. Marcus the link so you can see it. But you look at the whole process, the whole structure of that video, and the switches. That's what I wanted to ask you. They have all these little switches all over the lander when they're giving the little tour of it. And in my mind, I think those switches are just there for show aesthetics. What I mean, because I'm thinking about the time of the 1960s and the technology available. I find it hard to believe that all these little switches were specialized little gadgets. What would you say? Am I out of bounds for thinking that, or is that a realistic thing?
Well, if you look at the switches on the dash, and I mean, we did do a couple of videos on it. You'll see a whole row of them are simply for camera equipment where you can actually connect them, and the switches on and off, plus the lighting for them as well. That's like the whole panel designated just for the camera equipment in there. I mean, a lot of that stuff. And then you go over to the next panel and you see it, and it has little gauges on it, and it has steam pressure on and off and relief valves. Now, why does a vehicle have steam? Unless you're going to simulate steam for the exhaust coming out.
I think I can answer that. I found the answer.
Yeah?
Possibly. When you've got a rocket that is powered by liquid fuel and oxidizer, you've got to have a turbo pump to pump the fuel and oxidizer into the combustion chamber. It doesn't just, I mean, you don't just flick a switch and it falls down by gravity. It's got to be driven in. So how is the turbo pump operated? How is it spun? Because a turbo pump is basically a spinning disc or two discs. And that is where the steam comes in my opinion. Because if you look at the design of the V2 rocket.
Yeah, they used the steam to initially start it.
But where did the steam come from? How was the steam generated?
Well, that's built in on the ground, piece of equipment that's on the ground just to start it.
No. I discovered that it does use steam, and the way the steam was generated was a combination by combining hydrogen peroxide at 80%, which is very concentrated, as H2O2. That's the formula for hydrogen peroxide. And you add sodium permanganate to the hydrogen peroxide. It will immediately turn into steam. It will become explosive. And if you control that explosive emission of steam, because that's what it is, you will drive the turbo pump, which drives the fuel into the combustion chamber. That was the V2 means of doing it. Now, the same guy designed the Saturn V rocket, Werner von Braun.
Yeah, well, that's fine for the rocket, but for the anything that's on the LEM, okay, all the diagrams show that they were using helium. That's what the helium tank's for, is to pressurize the fuel.
Yes,
because it did not have a pump.
Yeah, no, that's correct. On the lunar lander, on the engines on the lunar lander, the descent engine and the ascent engine, they was using hypergolic fuel, which when the two fuels pressurized by helium come together, they explode and create the rocket take off.
And the helium tank keeps the fuel tanks pressurized.
Yes, and it's the helium tank that they got problems with on Elon Musk's rocket.
And they still have the same problem today.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, but Apollo had what they called supercritical helium, because the space they had wasn't large enough for helium when they compressed it in there. Yeah. So they created helium that doesn't exist anymore today, so that it would fit in a smaller space to power the vehicle, right? To keep that pressure up in the vehicle. And then, of course, in Apollo 15, well, they needed to put a rover on, and they just got rid of the helium tank. You know, put the rover in the same spot. It's not relocated anywhere because there is no place to relocate it. But those are the anomalies of Apollo, and of course, once you put a NASA sticker on it, it just works.
Yep, it works. It works every time. sometimes they generate a lovely piece of drama to keep people interested. You know, the 1202 alarm on Apollo 11, the pointing at the camera on Apollo 12, the fabulous story of Apollo 13. That's a great piece of script writing. Not the Tom Hanks film, something else. Apollo 14, golf balls in space. Apollo 15, lunar rover. Cars on the moon. Apollo 16, thousands of first aid covers being franked on the moon. That caused a lot of problems. Apollo 17, flags waving as astronauts walk past them. 3 days on the moon, and they're not cooked in their lander. And there's the last man on the moon. Oh dear, oh dear. So the whole Apollo is a wonderful film script with drama, technology, and humor.
They're still golfing today.
Yeah,
they're still golfing today in the underwater tanks.
Yes,
when they're doing the suit. Remember, they got the golf ball down at underwater tanks for the Apollo 14, the whole 9 yards, and they created underwater regolith.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they created all of that stuff. That's amazing technology that they've done.
Yeah, but nowadays you get it on eBay.
Yep.
Lunar regolith. You can buy it $30 a kilo on eBay. That's probably what NASA do.
Yeah. Well, everything is to make money, is it not?
Oh, it is. That's all it is. You got to pay all these people who stand around picking up bits of board when the big crawler goes along. You've got to pay these people a lot of money. I doubt there's anybody working at the launch site now who's paid much less than $50,000 a year. A few thousand.
I'd double that. Disney pays $100,000 a year for its workers.
Yeah.
Goddamn. I'm gonna buy a house in Orlando. That's where I may need to work.
and you can buy the Rolls Royce Cullinan to go in the garage, can't you?
Oh yeah. I think I told you guys that I went to Cocoa Beach a few years ago, and that's kind of what made me swing to the side of non-belief, was seeing the damn lander. You know, it was a replica, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was the original, but seeing the replica in the flesh, if you will, I was like, man, I've lived in Florida for 10 years. This damn thing couldn't survive a Florida hurricane. Let's say they left the lunar lander outside in the parking lot and they packed everything up and, the lunar lander will be all right. A Florida hurricane came through, that thing wouldn't be standing. And that was one of the things that personally made me like, yeah, there's no way. And then I did play the clip last time of Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about it, where we don't have anything today that can get us up there. And we've mentioned the Artemis program, where the can keeps getting kicked down the road. Postponed. We were supposed to have an Artemis launch just recently, and it's been postponed again, just over and over. Every time that date comes up, it gets postponed. And so, Scott, when you think about it, do you think that disclosure is coming, or do they still have to keep the lie going?
I think they have enough of the population at this particular time that they're just going to continue on with it because the money is there for them. It's a cult. It actually is not just a cult; it's a religion.
So you said the money's there, and I mentioned to Mr. Allen earlier that I feel, this is my own opinion, I feel like NASA's really like a money laundering operation, because there's no way in hell we landed man on the moon. So, and if you look at their 2024 budget, you look at their 2023 budget, you're talking about $24 billion each of those years. So in the last couple of years, that's $50 billion essentially that they're getting. So this whole nonsense, well, the budget has been slashed, and NASA, that's the reason we can't get it. That's a bunch of hogwash. Fifty
Well,
billion dollars in 2 years is a lot of damn money.
yeah, but it's a very small percentage of the U.S. Budget.
It is, but $51 billion.
But
If they
still,
can't,
could still do
if,
some good. You could
yeah,
get
but if they
homeless
can't go
people
to the moon, what are they using that money for? That's the question.
on the attempt that I do believe that they're not spending the money and not having a purpose behind it. Okay, I don't think traveling to the moon is the major priority. I think as far as gaining access to space to be able to be there in a very stable and secure manner or permanent manner is very high on the charts as far as a military application. Okay, to have stable orbiting platforms with defensive systems, I think that's a very high priority. Okay, and not to mention just the spy business and everything else. It's all part of the military stuff. Communications, they may be working on it to be able to resolve some of the anomalies that happen in space. I mean, the uncontrollable CMEs that are sitting there that are going to damage equipment. Now, they may be able to harden them to the point where they are survivable. If they get enough early warning of any kind, they can certainly turn them off or protect them in a certain way. But you're going to have interruption in your signal. Even then, like if you have that kind of electromagnetic interference in any kind of a signal, it's going to interrupt the signal because you have to have an antenna to send that out, right? And it's going to be exposed, even if you can protect the rest of the equipment so it stays alive, right? They've always said, oh, we're able to turn it off. When it's affecting equipment that's on the ground, the stuff that they have in space is going to be damaged or rendered useless or whatever, right? Or a complete interruption. Like in 1989, we had a fairly high interruption on the North American coast. Okay, that's Canada and the US. Okay, the power went down. I forget how many days it was off in New York. It was 4 or 5 days in New York City, but it took the entire power grid down. And it was running. Even an alternator in a car, if the car was running, it would just kill it. That kind of power, right? It excites that kind of interruption excites the power grid and just boosts the voltage up that's running through everything. The major power plants had to get offline. They had to disconnect from the grid and shut down. And that's a huge problem for a nuclear power plant. You just don't turn those things off. Right? You just can't turn the switch off. They have to be powered down, right? And that was the problem. New York, one of the power plants had stayed on long enough trying to keep the power alive for everybody that it literally burnt the entire system out. So it took even longer to repair. So in 1989, all of these systems went down. Everything was repaired, included all the satellite transmissions without a single launch. So how do you repair satellite transmissions without a single launch? If satellites were such a high priority, okay, and I'm sitting here in Canada, how come we don't have a single launch pad? We've got all kinds of major communication systems, Bell Canada, Rogers, Shaw, all those communication networks, right? They don't have a launch pad. Okay. They're working off of cables. They're working off of fiber optic cables. Right? And if you want to see Bell satellite TV, well, in the 1960s, you could buy a satellite car as well, right? It was called a satellite. It's a brand name. It has nothing to do with the physical aspects of the thing. So Bell satellite just means that you've got a satellite dish that's running to a tower. Right? And if they were actually there, okay, you wouldn't lose the signal. Like you could be driving across Texas for Christ's sakes, and you could lose signal with your cell phones, right? Because if they're actually bouncing off, you can take your cell phone. You can take your cell phone and bounce it off, and it tells you how many satellites it's bouncing off of. No, it's not. It's how many cell towers it's bouncing off of, right? But you can actually lose the signal driving across Texas. Okay, and if the Clark Belt is there with all those so-called communication satellites up there, you're that close to the equator, there's no way you would lose a signal going across Texas. Right? We have the same problem in Canada. You get out of range of your GPS coordinates and cell phone. Right? You get to the UK and you get up to the Shepherd Islands, and there's no communication or anything up there, right? They haven't built the cables across to the islands yet, have they, Marcus?
I don't think so. No, I think they're still isolated.
They're still isolated.
Yeah.
I remember Neil saying he was taking a holiday there and he'd be out of communication until he gets back, right? Well, how come you can go across, what's that, 40, 50 miles of water?
Yeah. Oh, less than that.
Less than that?
Yeah. I've actually sailed up to the Shetland Islands. Nice place. Very nice. A bit windy. There aren't any trees up there, but it's a bit windy. But it's nice.
You're hitting what parallel are you on there?
Be about 54, 55, something like that.
Yeah, you're getting up to where the trees don't grow. But anyway, just across that little bit of water, you've got, internet, everything, communication everywhere. And to cross that little bit of difference, what's the number of degrees on a satellite difference if you're transmitting from space? Okay, like it's less than a 1 degree difference in where that signal is sending to if you're coming from a satellite from space. So there should be no problem being able to communicate with that island. Okay, there's no way you couldn't possibly cover Texas 100% complete. There should be no gap in it. Okay, when you have those lovely little hurricanes and tornadoes that go through the U.S., like you guys have the U.S. seem to have the monopoly on those type of things, right? Why would a hurricane knock out communications if they're coming from a satellite? And you can see that anytime there's a news thing on there, they've got the big old boxes standing there, the guys that are doing the thing for the live broadcast on it, right? And they're actually using helicopters to transmit that till they get to a live tower. They just relay it off helicopters to get it out of there because there is no communications coming from a satellite. There'd be no reason. Why would a hurricane interrupt a satellite signal, right? If you've got a satellite device in your hand, it should not be interrupted just because there's a little hurricane out there, right? And you see it all the time.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the, and maybe I'm just ignorant on this, and we touched on it a little bit with Marcus when it comes to the infamous phone call from the moon to President Nixon. How the hell was that possible? Let's assume they made it to the moon. I mean, you're talking about an analog era. You're talking about antennas and no satellites up there quite yet. So how the hell was that possible?
Good question. I don't know.
Well, he was behind the fourth wall.
Something like that, yes. But then Nixon had to be seen to be taking credit for it all, didn't he? And he was going to have peace on earth, I seem to remember. So why the hell they were bombing Laos and Cambodia? And why were 58,000 Americans killed in Vietnam? Where's the answer to that, Mr. Nixon? Because powerful companies wanted to make products which the American government would buy and go and kill people in foreign countries. It's a good business model if you can get it and keep it working. So you've got to have wars all the time. That's why America invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. Every time a plane is shot out of the sky or a bomb is dropped from an aircraft, that's a lot of money to a lot of companies. That's what war is about. It's about money. It's not freedom. There's no freedom.
You're saying it's not about freedom fries? Mr. Allen, did you ever read the book by General Smedley Butler, War is a Racket?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's only, I'll send you a link to that audiobook. It's only 1 hour long,
Okay.
Read to you. But pretty much what you talked about just right now, that's what General Smedley, a 5-star general in the American military in the early 1900s, that's the name of his book, War is a Racket. And he goes, the bootmaker makes money, the pant maker makes money. Everyone's making that money when war's afoot. And this guy was one of the highest ranking generals in the entire American military. So he knew exactly what he was talking about. It wasn't just conjecture. And the fascinating part is he wrote that book well over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And the same playbook is still being adhered to this day.
And do you know who the only American president who hasn't engaged America in a war?
Was it the porn star president?
Quite a recent president.
So Trump, right?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Trump did not engage America in any foreign wars.
He didn't, but he did tease a couple. He teased going into Venezuela. He also teased Iran and going into Iran. So,
Yeah,
and maybe that's where, like, I know some people think Trump will be the game changer. I don't believe that because of his Epstein connections and this whole 34 counts that he's facing. I think it's a sham. I absolutely, it's all bogus. However, if he would have been nailed for his Epstein ties or real crimes, and if we would have seen Bill Clinton or George Bush held as war criminals, or Obama killed many, many innocent people via drone strikes. But we're never going to see that. So this whole trial with Trump right now, in my opinion, it's just show and circus. I know some people get real emotionally attached out here. Some people real happy about it. Some people real sad about it. I just sit here, watch it, and laugh. It's all a circus, in my opinion. And you folks may disagree, and feel free to discuss.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on that. I don't agree with you totally on Trump and Epstein. You've heard the story of when Trump invited Epstein to visit Mar-a-Lago.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that story?
Yeah, it's mythology. It's not. There's no. Their relationship. The more credible part about it is that their relationship soured over a real estate deal. There's a story going around that he caught Epstein in the act and took him off. It's a comic book scene, and he called the authorities, and here's Trump with his Superman cape. It's all, in my opinion, complete mythology. It's nonsense. You've got Trump's friend, or Trump was a friend of Epstein for many, many years, well over a decade. I think 15 years before their friendship expired. Tell me, how many friends do you have personally that you know very good for 15 years? You know well enough to get into their plane. You got to have, that's next level friendship, in my opinion, when you're willing to go into their plane. Trump owns his own plane. So the next question is, okay, Trump owns his own plane. Why the hell did he fly in Trump or Epstein's plane 7 times. He has his own plane.
Cheaper than
So-
flying a plane.
Yeah, and again, to get into someone's plane, you don't get in a stranger's plane.
Yeah,
There's
the
a relationship there. There's trust there.
story I was referring to was not any of the real estate deals, which obviously Trump would have been involved in. It was what happened to one of the young kitchen workers at Mar-a-Lago. Epstein hit on her.
Yeah.
Trying to recruit her for his operation. And Trump took against it and chucked him out. And he's never visited Mar-a-Lago since.
Yeah, I heard that. And that one's parroted by one of the Epstein victims' lawyer that represents about 30 of them, not very many of them, considering that Epstein's victims probably number in the thousands. And so people take that and say, well, that they apply it as a general broad stroke to every other victim, when that's not the case. Here's another story, or very little known fact that people ever talk about. How did Donald Trump meet Melania?
I don't know.
Through Jeff Epstein. that one for, and it makes sense why people don't want to talk about it, especially Trump supporters, because it's a damning one. And it's not just to pick on Trump. I mean, Bill Clinton flew on the damn plane 28 times. My whole thing is all these guys are, and let's talk about Donald Trump and Bill Clinton. Those guys, you can find plethora of photos of them golfing and hanging out. You have a quote from Donald Trump in 2009 saying Hillary Clinton would make an exquisite president. So to me, it's all wrestling. It's like a wrestling match. And you may disagree. You need your good guys, you need your bad guys, and you're gonna have your heroes and your villains. It makes for great Shakespearean theater. Yeah. And that's what we're in right now.
Well, I'll tell you straight up. Whatever relationship that they had, okay, if you want to sour a really good relationship with anybody, just sell them your used boat. Okay? I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a boat, a middle-sized boat, or you sell them a yacht. Okay, they are a nightmare. They're a money pit from day one. It doesn't matter how good a condition is, and you sell them that, your friendship is done.
But you're done. So
you want to end it? Just here, buy my boat. Done.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Yeah, I mean,
like I say, just run it out through Haulover when you're done. Passage, and just take millions of dollars and watch it just hit the bottom. Right?
Yeah, boats. That's one of those things that I don't understand. They're huge money pits, especially if you get a saltwater one. I live in Florida, and you see these yachts cruising around, and like, God damn, man. I mean, like you said, they're money pits. I had a friend that owned a little freshwater one.
Look at all the ones on trailers sitting there for free in Florida. Just get it out of my yard, right?
Yeah,
runs great.
They're like
you hit the water.
Marcus said, NASA never a straight answer. There's one for boat. Like, I think it's something like you're always like spending money. Break another.
Yeah, bring out another.
Break out another, or bring out another 1,000 is boat.
Every time you put it in the water. Yeah, that's just a little one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Break out another 1,000. I like that. Great.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where the supporters of one will come up with arguments, but I feel confident. Like, if we were kind of like debating the moon landing, if someone wants to debate me, no, Trump is a good guy, I feel confident that I would erode that confidence in them. I think they're all puppets at the end of the day, and we only have each other. That's just my opinion. And tying it all back into the moon landing, I was speaking with my cousin last night. I had a hit of the old cannabis herbs, and I got nostalgic, and I called my cousin. I go, because I'm in Florida. I'm the only one of my family that lives out here. Everyone else is out west. So I called him up. We were talking, and it, he asked me, well, he was feeling me out on the whole moon landings, my arguments against it, and blah blah blah. But he was like, well, who cares? What if it is fake? What's the big deal with it? My answer to that was, if you realize that it is a lie, it's a lie that we were taught as kids. It's a lie that gets continued to be taught to our kids, and it'll presumably be taught to their kids long after we're gone. It's important to realize that lie, because then when the next nonsense, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a quote unquote terrorist attack, you will be more in tune with that. That was my answer to him. What would be each of your guys' answer, to such a question? Like, why do you care? Why is it important to know?
Go ahead, Marcus.
Sorry, go on, Scott.
You want me to go ahead?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to for our own existence. It's important for people to understand that this planet, okay, is a very finite resource for humans to live on, right? The fact that people sit there and say, "Oh, well, we can go populate another planet. If this planet screws up, we'll just, re-engineer another planet and we'll go live there," right? Or we can survive in space without Earth. Not true. Okay? We need to be aware of the fact that we are caretakers of this planet. Okay? And we are destroying this planet at an alarming rate. We're plants, animals, everything else, if we don't like it, we just simply kill it off. Okay, you take a plant, it's a beautiful flower, we look after it, right? You can plant you can eat or whatever, anything else is gone. You don't like bugs or pests, we got enough pesticides to kill anything off, right? We'll fish the oceans out and have been done so. We have been capable as a species to extinct a species of animal in the oceans with rowboats and spears. Okay, think of how fast we can extinct any population of species with our equipment we have today. Okay, and our sonars and everything else, we can do schools of fish and just net them up, and the nets are miles big, right? Onboard factories to process that. You realize the stuff you buy in the store is processed at sea, frozen, cooked and frozen at sea and breaded. Okay, when it comes on board, you have no idea what's going into it. Like, just chew it all up and tell you it's this, right? But we have that ability. We need to be aware of how rapidly we can endanger our own lives in doing so, and we have done so in the past, and we're still doing so today, right? The amount of chemicals that are going into our bodies. You walk into a pharmacy and just look at the rows of shelves of chemicals that are in there. Medications, whatever. Okay? Just because people ingest them through their bodies because they need them, right? How's that being processed in the system? The artificially made chemicals, right? They're in our water system. Okay? If you don't have a heart problem, you're still taking heart medication. Right? Because it's in our water system. It's in our animals. It's everywhere on the planet. Right? It just spreads everywhere. We have to be more aware of that. Okay? We have to be responsible for this planet we live on. We have to control our population. Okay? I'm not saying like there are people out there that simply want to wipe it back to whatever. No, we need to bring it back down slowly and control it. Right? We have to be aware of our climate changes. We have to be aware of how we grow things, where we grow things. You know, our mining systems are just out of control, right? They do environmental damage, and nobody is controlling it because the money controls it, right? There's profit. If you don't clean it up, you make more profit. We have to be aware of those things. The fiction of Apollo thinks that makes us think that we are above that we can conquer anything, right? The fact of the matter is we can't cure a common cold. Okay, and that brings your feet right back down to the ground when you're looking at things logically. That's why it's important. That's why it's important that we have the truth on this matter.
I love it. That's a great answer, and I'm not asking for people to agree with my answer. I mean, that's just my answer, and I believe we all have our own answers. So I'm just simply curious, what's your answer to that question, Mr. Allen?
That's it's a very good question, actually. It's one of those that is not really given too much thought. I think what Scott is saying is basically correct. We are a species with amnesia. We don't know what we've done. We choose to ignore it. Now, whether Apollo is publicly admitted to be a fraud, which I happen to believe it was, either doesn't matter at all, because eventually the truth will come out when it is seen that we cannot, with our current technology, return to the moon, because that's what we're trying to do. It's a bit of a lie in itself, because returning to the moon implies we've already got there once. But if we never did, how can we return there? And it's actually irrelevant in some other cases. It's a relatively small but very important part of our development as humans that we should know the truth about what we have allegedly done. Many things we have done, some of them have been very dangerous, like climbing tall mountains, flying small planes across large oceans, and those are never questioned because the evidence for them is so overwhelming that to question them, like who were the first people to climb Mount Everest? Probably Mallory, who was one of the first to claim it, or it was said he did, but there's no evidence that he did, and that's his problem. The first to officially climb Everest was Tenzing and Edmund Hillary and his Sherpa porter Tenzing. The evidence for it is overwhelming. Nobody questions that. But the evidence for the moon landings is so tenuous and so questionable, and we're seeing 60 years after it happened that they cannot repeat it, that we question it. Now, a lot of people in America, I'm from the UK, so it's possibly I'm slightly less emotionally involved, are wedded to the idea. They say it's part of American history that we landed on the moon. It's American exceptionalism. It's a demonstration of American technological superiority. Yes, it was. That's what it was portrayed as. But unfortunately, if it didn't happen the way we were told, and it didn't, we've been discussing for the last 4.5 hours, so I think we've got it covered pretty well, the problem with it, it's going to emotionally upset a lot of people. Probably less than it would have been 20 years ago, but still a major proportion of the American population. I say American because there are many people around the world who don't believe it happened, not least in China, in India, in Russia. The European country with the most skepticism towards it is Hungary. There are intelligent people in Hungary. But because we want, or America wants to believe that they achieved this amazing objective, landing humans on the lunar surface, anybody who says it didn't happen is obviously anti-American, a complete idiot, don't know what they're talking about, and must be immediately silenced. I'm not going to be silenced. Scott won't be silenced. You won't be silenced, because we believe it's the truth when we say it didn't happen. It's going to take a while for the American population to come round to that idea. So get a move on, guys. If you're listening in America, get a move on, because you're way behind the curve and history has moved on. Sorry about it. But you also have a great deal to be proud of as Americans. A great deal to be proud of. Not least of which is the creation of the American society, which fractured though it may be, but it's never been anything other than fractured. From the time the first wagon trains headed west to whether we landed on the moon, it's the same thing. There are things to be proud of, but there are things that one has to admit were not correct. This is one of them. And it's going to cause a problem. If the president, whoever it happens to be in the next 5 years, stands up on his podium and says, okay, guys, we did lie about the moon landings. Sorry about that, but it was necessary at the time. We were in mortal danger of being destroyed by the Soviet Union. We had to demonstrate to the world that we could do it too. And that is how we chose to demonstrate it. The fact that it wasn't real is neither here nor there. But we demonstrated it to the world and they believed it. As I said earlier, it was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise to demonstrate to the world the superiority of American technology, in that it was supremely successful. But it wasn't real. It was propaganda. As soon as people are able to decide that for themselves, then we can move on, because there are so many things that we need to be looking at now. Scott has covered many of them. But what we also need to be looking at is how we do travel in space. The electrogravitics, which went black 70 years ago. They were being discussed publicly. Going to Mars, I think we should forget that, because we don't have the means to do it in the first place. And what's the purpose of getting there, other than to say we got there? There's nothing to find there. It's a completely barren rock. No use to anybody. Earth is not a barren rock. Earth is a beautiful, productive planet. Whether we decide that energy can be generated from pyramids, as we discussed earlier, or whether oil is an infinitely producing resource, is neither here nor there. But to refuse to use oil would be one of the great acts of self-harm of 20th century, 21st century civilization. How many products are made from crude oil that we use almost without thinking about it? From plastics to fertilizer, to medicines, to road surfaces, to car tires, to computers, to phones. They're all made from crude oil. And that's why we need crude oil. Maybe we don't need it in our cars, but until we get something better to power our cars, our trucks, our planes, our ships, we're going to continue to use it, because we don't want to stop the products that they bring to us from arriving. Crude oil is the basis of 21st century civilization. Either come up with a better idea or shut up. It's that simple. So if we acknowledge that Apollo was fake, the number of scientists, and there are very, very intelligent and clever people working for NASA, they could direct their energies to something more productive, like zero-point energy would be one. If we can produce that, forget about burning oil out of the ground. We could probably produce other things. That's what we need to do. So let's admit that one of the 20th century's prime events, the landing of the men on the moon, was a propaganda exercise and was faked. and let's redirect our efforts into a new Apollo-style moon landing program of generating the energy that this civilization requires from clean, non-polluting sources, i.e. zero-point energy. Let's do that. That would be the good legacy of Apollo.
I definitely agree with that. I'm just, again, a skeptic. Imagine if we indeed, I genuinely believe NASA's a money laundering operation. I know you guys have different views on it, but if I could imagine that they were genuinely using that money for further progress, for further technological advances, then damn straight. We could actually get to the damn moon and send man to the moon. But I think there's too much screwing around. And what troubles me, I'm in Florida, and every year we have this thing called red tide that comes to our beaches. And coincidentally, they seem to happen when it's the least populated time of the year, which means it's the hottest time of the year. A lot of times during the hottest times of the year, the tourists stay out. They stay up north. They stay in their home states. They don't bother coming down here. And around those times, red tide happens. Now, some more honest journalists will say it's funny how red tide coincides when Lake Okeechobee releases its fertilizer-rich water into the ocean, causing the red algae to just massively bloom, and in return sucking out all the oxygen in those regions of the water. And if you suck out all that oxygen, that's going to kill a crap ton of fish. And indeed, hundreds of tons of marine life are killed and washed up on shores every damn year, including some manatees and dolphins. And when I see this, I just start to think, if you or I were walking on the beach and there was a cop watching us and we decided to just throw a piece of trash out on the beach, what would happen to us? We would be arrested, maybe cited only, but maybe possibly even arrested for polluting the ocean. And yet when Big Sugar releases these fertilizer-rich waters from Lake Okeechobee into the ocean, causing hundreds of tons of marine life to perish in the process, nothing happens. Not even a slap on the wrist. Nothing.
Well, you don't hear it on the news.
You don't hear it on the news, and this is what makes me into a skeptic. So I'm just trying to tell you the things that I see, that why I'm not as hopeful maybe as I should be. It's just little things like that. It's troubling. You see a manatee on the freaking ocean, and it's dead. And if you or I were to pull a shotgun and just shoot a manatee for fun, we would be hauled out to prison. But these poor corporations behind these releases are never held accountable.
You wouldn't survive in prison if they found out you killed a manatee. I've fished on Lake Okeechobee, and this is the first of me hearing about this red tide. Seriously,
yeah, that's time I've heard of it too.
Yeah, it's a well-kept secret. And
where does it release to?
It releases to the west coast.
The canals run right across the state.
Yeah, it's right into the Gulf Coast.
Really?
Usually it starts over in the Naples area, and it will travel up near the Tampa area. So it covers quite a bit of territory.
So it's going right across. Lake Okeechobee is going right across those canals that are going across are releasing this
fertilizer-rich water.
Yeah, which consuming all the oxygen, right?
Yeah,
it's consuming
that's one scientific theory. There's another scientific theory that says, well, red tide is natural. It's been happening forever. And my theory is that these guys are the ones paid by these big sugar companies. And of course they would say such a thing. But you have to look at the evidence. Why does red tide coincide with Lake Okeechobee releases?
That's unreal. You got to wonder what chemicals have been put in. I understand that, like, you start fertilizing land, right? And you're going to increase the algae into a body of water. I mean, if you want to take
big
a look
sugars in that area.
So yeah, well, that'll do it too.
Yeah, that'll do a
lot. We have the same problem on lakes in Alberta and stuff like that in Canada. There's documentaries on the amount of fertilizers that are getting into the larger lakes, right? And it's causing algae. And of course, the algae is just gets rid of the oxygen in the water like you wouldn't believe, right?
Yeah, and that's the troubling part. I mean, I love science, and it's cases like that make me lose a lot of faith in science. Science should be able to be questioned. If it has a solid foundation, it will withstand all criticism. But when you blatantly see it doesn't matter if it's big sugar, big oil, whatever, big pharma, control the narrative in many of these instances and disguises itself as science and shuts down any criticism towards it. It makes you lose a lot of faith in that, and that's where I'm at when it comes to science, because I still believe in science. I just don't believe in the science. And for some people they don't understand the difference, but for others, they clearly know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Science has been politicized.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a story which I found out about it years ago. Smoking was causing lung cancer, we were told. Therefore, smoking should be banned or reduced or made so expensive nobody wants to buy them. It's not smoking that causes lung cancer. It's diesel particulates. Now, that was identified about 50 years ago, before all the propaganda about smoking is causing lung cancer. I mean, many people know people who've died from lung cancer who never touched a cigarette in their life. People who've smoked a pack a day for 50 years.
Yeah, and lived into their 90s. I knew my cousin's grandma was that way. She'd smoke a pack every day, and she died in her late 90s.
Yeah, well, good for her. Now, what was interesting was a researcher at the University of Oxford, and she decided to look into this. This was around the time when it was becoming a fairly common discussion. She said, I wonder if it is correct to say that smoking causes lung cancer, or is there another possible cause of it? And she decided to have a look at diesel particulates. That's the PM2.5, the very small particles that were released. This is 50 years ago, before a lot of vehicles were cleaned up and exhaust was cleaned up. So she said, right, I'm going to take two areas that have similar levels of diesel vehicle that have a lot of diesel vehicles, and another area that has no diesel vehicles, and see if there's a difference in the lung cancer rates. And the two areas she chose was Holland, or the Netherlands, which has at that time, excuse me, and still has a large proportion of diesel vehicles, and South Africa, where the white population in South Africa were descended from Dutch people from the Netherlands. They're called the Boers in South Africa. And she looked at the lung cancer rate in Holland and the lung cancer rates in South Africa. In Holland, or the Netherlands is called, there was quite a high level of cancer, lung cancer specifically. In South Africa, it was virtually unknown. Now, in South Africa, this is at the time of the apartheid restrictions, and diesel fuel could not be imported into South Africa. So all their vehicles were driven by gas or petrol. The trucks were, the buses were, the trains were. There was no diesel available to South Africa, and no lung cancer. Large proportion of people in Holland drove diesel vehicles, high proportion of lung cancer. And you can't avoid breathing in diesel fumes if you live in that area. Obviously, there'll be some people like your relative who won't be affected, but there are a lot of people who are. But that is not being looked at. And the reason was that the tobacco lobby was much smaller than the petrol lobby. And so guess who won? Who put enough money behind the propaganda to look at smoking rather than diesel?
That's fascinating. I had never heard that. This is the first time I'm hearing that, and I'm definitely going to be researching that. Yeah, propaganda is huge.
The researcher at Oxford was called Kitty Little, Kitty, Kitty Little, as in small. Kitty. Just search Kitty Little smoking diesel and see what you come up with.
Holy smokes!
Yeah.
No pun intended. Yeah, yeah, that's super wild. But it doesn't surprise me. There's
another podcast.
What's that?
What?
That's another podcast right there.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
I'll tell you another podcast. Nuclear war. Nuclear war is impossible.
So I have heard, and I'm not averse to it, and I would love to hear Scott's thoughts on this, but I'm not averse to it simply for the fact that when you look at the nuclear war videos of that, I think everyone's seen it. The houses getting blown to smithereens, and the camera's intact. And these houses look like little model miniatures. I have questions. I'm not going to say I'm all on board into disbelieving, but I have a lot of goddamn questions. What's your thoughts on that, Scott?
Well, I think, the camera technology, even at the time, was good enough to display those in any kind of miniaturized version of the thing. The one thing that really sets things apart, if you take a look at Hiroshima and how it's repopulated at this particular time, and then you take a look at Chernobyl, and you realize that the radiation is still there, affecting the area enough. What kind of bomb was that was dropped? I mean, it's incredibly powerful, but it wasn't atomic. It doesn't produce the radioactive signature. If you were to take a full nuclear reaction and create that, the bomb would be much larger for the amount of material, but the radiation signature would still be there, and it would be uninhabitable on the thing. And I mean, Marcus knows a hell of a lot more about it than I do on that particular thing. But what I was going to say was Colitas, the Eagles, Hotel California. That was the song that I was trying to refer to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The whole nukes thing is interesting, because there are people that say nukes don't exist. What they do is carpet bomb a place and call it a nuke. I don't know. I'm still trying to search for truth. But when you see those videos, those 1950s videos, and it looks like clearly like a dollhouse getting blown over, I'm remiss to think about the NASA moon landings. And so with a lot of these things, the same playbook gets used over and over again. And so that's what I'm always, it's always in the back of my mind. Is this nonsense? I don't want to completely write it off because I could be wrong, and I'm open to being wrong. I just want to be shown how I was wrong, what was the wrong thing that I was engaging with, and correct that behavior. I don't. I'm not. I try not to be a person that just lays down the anchor, and this is the only way I'm going to think, and that's it. I'm going to dismiss everything else. I want to keep an open mind.
Okay.
And
Shall I explain my
yes, I want to hear it, Mr.
Okay.
Allen.
Okay. Nuclear weapons. The only two nuclear bombs that have ever been used in anger dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan in 1945 to try to end World War II. Okay. The plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima was piloted by, I've got his name now, doesn't matter. The first message he transmitted back to Guam, which is where they flew from, was, "We got it within 1 second." That was the first message he transmitted from the plane. It's called the Enola Gay. It was a B-29 bomber named after his mother. Anyway, that's just by the by. Why was the first message transmitted, "We got it to within 1 second"? That implies that it's necessary to get the explosion to happen at a very precise time. Same thing with Nagasaki. Nagasaki was not the prime target. The prime target was Kobe, an industrial center in Japan, still is today. But Kobe was covered with cloud. They couldn't see the ground from the B-29 bomber. So they went to the secondary target, which was Nagasaki, about 20 minutes flying time. But they didn't drop the bomb immediately. They waited, they circled for 3 hours and then dropped the bomb. Why was it necessary to wait 3 hours when they could have dropped this thing, which was obliterated the whole city, and they wouldn't have needed to worry about it? They could just fly home and have a cup of coffee and say, drop the bomb, everything flattened, job done. Right, now move to France, to New Zealand in the late 90s, when France was conducting nuclear tests in the Murarora Atoll in the West Pacific. And you can remember that event because the Greenpeace ship going to protest against it was sunk in New Zealand. And one of the crew was killed. It was the French Secret Service trying to prevent the Greenpeace ship from going and getting in the way of the tests. At around the same time, a New Zealand pilot named Bruce Cathay, who had a great interest in following UFO tracks and such like, because he was a pilot, he could see them. He published in his local paper in Auckland the dates and times of the French nuclear tests. He got a visit from the police who said, "How do you know this? This is secret information. You have just caused a major incident. How do you know about the tests?" He said, "Very simple. I calculated it. I'll show you." And he demonstrated to the police officers how he achieved now, it was obviously confirmed that it was correct, or he wouldn't have had a visit. He said, "This is how I did it. A nuclear bomb does not just go off anywhere. A nuclear bomb will go off at certain physical locations on the Earth's planet at a very specific time. And that time is dependent on the angle of the sun above the horizon at that location. And the calculation is based on certain physical and metaphysical calculations. This is how it's done. And he showed them. And they said, okay, we understand that you can do it. Please do not tell anybody. He said, no, I'm going to publish it in my book. And he did. It's called Grid 33. So if he can calculate it by understanding that the angle of the sun, the reciprocal of the speed of light, and various other components of the calculation, which is fairly complex, can be done by somebody with enough intelligence and understanding of the science behind nuclear testing, then anybody with a nuclear weapon can do the same thing and have done. That is why, if anybody is threatened with a nuclear bomb and can work out when and where it will land, they can preempt the attack, and it will not happen. That is why no nation, though it will threaten with loud voices a nuclear attack, it will not be effective for that reason and that reason alone. Now, if anybody knows different, as I always say about the moon landings, prove me wrong. As far as the moon landings are concerned, I've been saying it for 30 years and it hasn't happened. I've been saying this about nuclear testing for 10 years and it hasn't happened. So maybe I'm right. So let's not worry about nuclear bombs. Every other test than Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Trinity site test prior to that was known about well in advance. Every test that has been done was a test. It wasn't a weapon. It was designed to be a weapon, but it would not work as a weapon because both sides would know when it was going to land and where it was going to land and could take precautions against it. So don't worry about nuclear warfare. It's never going to happen, guys.
So you don't, are you telling me, Mr. Marcus, that you don't ascribe to, so I'm looking for a home right now. I sold my old house here in Florida, and I don't know if I'm going to stay in Florida or if I'm going to move. I don't know. It's still up in the air, doing a lot of research. I don't want to make a stupid move. But one thing that does trouble me was seeing a report that the Russians have developed a nuclear submarine, which releases a nuclear torpedo that causes a nuclear tsunami, waves of 100 feet, high, and maybe you might survive that, but if you touch that water, that's radioactive water. That's what has been told to us in the mainstream press regarding the Russians. And, with everything escalating in the Middle East, with things escalating in Ukraine, with things escalating in Taiwan, I'm scared as hell. And then you also have this thing that a lot of Americans don't even know about. There's a thing called the Constitution-Free Zone, which encompasses the entire American country, and it starts from the ocean and it covers 100 miles inland. So if you live in those zones, which 90% of Americans do, you are in that Constitution-free zone. So if shit hits the fan, the Constitution doesn't mean anything. So that's in the back of my mind, whether I want to stay in Florida or not. Because if you take 100 miles, that encompasses the entire state of Florida, from one coast to the next coast. It's all under that Constitution-free zone. And if you don't believe me, definitely Google that Constitution-free zone, and you will be blown away, as I was. I had no idea about this until just recently. So,
but that is all based on one erroneous decision.
yeah,
Russia is going to attack with this famous. All submarines are nuclear.
a nuclear submarine. So you give me a little bit of hope, Marcus. Mr. Allen, where it's good to doubt it because I'm freaked out because Florida is flat. We have no hills. We have no mountains. If a tsunami, 100-foot tsunami hit here, we're all underwater.
I know we are, but don't worry about it. It's not going to happen. It's the proper. You don't tell me you've fallen for their propaganda again.
I just don't know what to believe. That's all. I don't know. I like to read it all, but I believe very little of it, and that's where I'm at these days. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what's fact. I don't know what's fiction.
Look,
Well, you see, what we should be discussing is the most powerful tool known to man. The most powerful tool. And that is fear of the unknown. It is the greatest motivating and driving force out there.
Yeah, it's called FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
Yes.
And if you can ramp up the fear, generate the uncertainty, you create the doubt. That's what they do. Now, if the threat that they're coming up with, in this case, a nuclear torpedo, which may well exist, part of the propaganda. But the idea that somebody, whether it's China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, the UK, could set this sort of thing off, they've immediately signed their own death warrant, because you could be reasonably certain that the B-52 bombers, which are continually in the air, would probably come along and drop one of their bombs on you, like Dr. Strangelove showed. So you've got all that. It won't happen. It can't happen. It's propaganda for political purposes to generate the fear of a supposed enemy. Is Russia a supposed enemy? Apparently. We're meant to believe that, which is a tragedy, because the Russian people are not interested in invading America, for goodness sake. I mean, what a stupid idea. They've got a big enough country of their own. It's the biggest one on the planet.
They make excellent vodka. What's the problem? They don't need to drink American beer.
You know, I'm not, and I hope people don't mistake me. I'm not a Putin apologist by any means, but he makes a good point when there's a video of him holding the globe, you know, just a little globe model, and he's basically saying in Russian, from what I understand, and what is translated as, look, you guys are worried about me, you know, Russia. If you took this globe and spinned it, just gave it a nice hard spin, you know, like you're gambling, and then just stopped it with your finger, just randomly, I'll put money that there is American influence in that region more so than any Russian influence. And when I heard him say that, I'm like, God damn, he's got a point. I'm not a fan of his. And I want to caveat that. I don't want people to think that I'm a Russian apologist or a fan, but he does have a good point. I mean, when you think of American influence across the globe, it's everywhere. It's in the islands. It's everywhere. We have bases everywhere.
Yeah, 800 of them. Yeah. 800 American bases around the world. How many Russian bases are there? About half a dozen.
That's why he had a point. I mean, you can say what you want about Putin, but when it comes to that, I mean, he's not wrong.
No, it's the oldest trick in the book. In order to generate fear amongst your own population, you must create an enemy, and then you can fight the enemy. That's all it is. It's the oldest trick in the book. It's been going on for centuries.
And you can collect a lot of money doing it.
Oh, you can look at all the money on the planes and the boats and the.
Now we're back to religion.
There you go. Sorted.
And now we've got a cult. We've got fear of the unknown, and people that are willing to cash in for that.
Yep, they do. They do.
See, I myself, I don't believe. I used to say that I was a hardcore atheist. I've moved on where I'm open. if you can show me proof that there is a higher power, I'm open to that. So, I'm open to that. But your proof has to be very, very strong. I'm not going to rely on faith. That being said, I feel science, the current science model that we have, is a faith in its own, on its own. It's
Yeah.
very dogmatic.
It's
And
a
if you
religion.
question any parts of it, you are excommunicated from this religion. Any thoughts on that?
You must believe without evidence,
Yes,
just
you
like
might-
any other religion.
Yeah, faith.
Yeah, absolute faith in everything.
I always say that there are three things I believe in: Father Christmas, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny. Everything
love
else is evidence. As to whether there is a God, the Creator, whatever you want to call him, that can never be proved. You can never say there is a God, or you can never say there isn't a God, because there is no proof that will stand up to scrutiny. So it's a matter of belief and faith. Now, if you don't have faith and you only believe in Father Christmas, you can only accept what is real to you. If you choose to believe there is no higher spirit, there is no controlling force around the planet, fine, you don't have to. But you may be missing something.
But then people will come along and put the fear of God into you for not believing.
I know. And if you're not frightened of God, so you can't have the fear of God put into you, you're immune from that sort of activity. I tend to believe that there may well be a higher spirit known as God or the great architect or whatever you want to call him. It doesn't matter what you call him. We're only trying to identify something. But what God does, you can only decide for yourself. You cannot be told it. There is no evidence behind it. But if it happens, there is no doubting. There can be no doubt. And that is the great benefit. Now, whether God was created by some religion to organize social control, that has more evidence behind it than whether God exists or not. I don't know. I don't really care if God exists. It doesn't matter. That's not important. It's what goes on up here in our head.
I agree. I debated a gentleman that is very in tune with Bible scripture and whatnot. I debated him. I have no belief. And I grew up in a house of faith. My father is still a man of faith. And for me, personally speaking, that was my first red pill where I began to question a lot. Here I am as a young kid growing up in LA, and I'm being taught that Jesus is the Lord and Savior. We need to pray. If I'm bad, if I do anything bad, I'm going to be burning for eternity in a lake of fire. And I believe that. I believe that. And that was all out of love. If I was to burn in this eternal lake of fire, it's a symbol of love. That's what I believed. I no longer believe that. I believe it's all fairy tales. It's all a ruse to control us even further. And so that was my first sense of distrust. I had been brought up to believe in this God character. I had been brought up to believe in this Jesus character and all their rules. And if, if I was feeling a little frisky and I wanted to relieve some of that friskiness, I was going to be burning in hell for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Completely ignoring that we're all human and we're all animals, which is what I believe now.
Yeah.
That being said, that was my first red pill.
Hmm.
Then my next shocker came when I started questioning the government. So now I'm in this state where I feel I'm the only one that thinks this way. And it's weird. But then I keep meeting other people that feel this in much. I'm not saying they agree with everything I say, but in very similar ways where, yeah, religion is a sham. Yeah, government is a sham. And it's a weird feeling because you're building a new community. And for all we know, we could all be wrong. Maybe science, maybe you do need to mask up and get 69 boosters. I don't know. I just try to go with what makes sense, and I try to ignore the propaganda, this left right nonsense. And as I get older, I realize that when you're in the middle or try to strive for the middle ground, you're closer to the truth. You know, when you're gung ho on one side or the other side, throughout history, we've seen the sides flip flop. The one side that thought they were absolutely right turned out to be absolutely wrong. And we see that flip flop throughout history. And it's not just American history. You see that globally, throughout the world. So one thing that remains constant is the people that try to remain neutral, try to remain in the middle, try to analyze the data as it comes in, and then make as much of an informed decision as can be. That's what will hopefully get you closer to the truth. But even then, I mean, we're in this crux where I'm so confused. I don't know if you guys feel that way. I would definitely be interested in Mr. Marcus' full thoughts on it, because I mean, you are 84 years of age, is that, or 84 years young? Let me rephrase that. Is that correct?
Yeah, about that.
Okay, and I am in full respect of that. I mean, the things that you have seen in your lifetime, you know, to now, the evolution, maybe you've seen some patterns that I would love to know, you know, as someone less than half, you know, your senior. I would love to know so that I can learn from it. I'm always trying to gain knowledge, you know, every moment that I can. But I would love to hear some words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. No, I think what you say is quite correct. There's a lot of people believe certain things, and that informs their life because they don't have the experience or the life lessons that they have learned haven't included that. So they believe they're being told the truth, whether they go to school or whether they go to church, or whether they have a job or they join any of the military services. They're told what to believe and they go along with it because they have no reason not to, or they don't have enough experience to be able to challenge what they're being told against what they have learned in other areas. Yeah, I've been around for long enough to be able to identify certain continuous problems. I always say that I read the mainstream papers. I watch the mainstream television, so I know what people are being told to believe. And I can identify through years of experience, 60 years I've been at this game, I can identify where we're being fed false information. And I think the most dramatic illustration of that was the most recent one, where this vaccine problem came up. People were told they had to have it. They were mandated to have it. If you didn't have it, you'd lose your job. Fortunately, I'm self-employed, so my boss said, it's okay, guys, carry on. But a lot of people didn't have that option. You're not jabbed, you're out of here. We now know that that was completely incorrect because the jab did not do what we're told it did. In short, they lied to us, but they were trying to help us. And that's how it was portrayed. So if there's any lesson I've learned, it is that you have to be able to identify when you are being manipulated.
Mhm.
And that's quite easy to do. You read the mainstream press, you listen to the mainstream press, and they will tell you what to believe. Whether it's politics or science or architecture or motor transport or anything like that, you're told what to believe. Cars are going to be freedom. You can go where you want when you want. Yes, that's true. Until they start controlling what car you can use to do that freedom with. It must be electric because we're going to save the planet. From what? The planet doesn't need saving. The planet's been around for 4.5 billion years, doing its own thing. If it doesn't like human activity on this planet, we'll probably get a big asteroid, hit the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and we'll all drown. And the planet will carry on. It wouldn't give a shit about humans because we're like a flea on the back of an elephant. We won't have an effect on it. The planet is far bigger than any human endeavor. We dig a few holes in the ground, yes. We pump up a few bits of what are called fossil fuels. Why are they called fossil fuels? Anybody know why they're called fossil fuels?
Tell me why. That's one thing I want to know. I had Dr. Judy Wood on my show. She's a very famous scientist. I was lucky to have her on my show. She used to be regaled and paraded around the mainstream as a climate scientist that believed in climate change. After further research, Dr. Judy Wood says she's not a climate. She's been portrayed as a climate changer denier, but she just says, no, I don't deny climate change. I just have questions about the way it's being portrayed on the media. And now she went from being a darling of the mainstream to now cast out as a conspiracy theorist, a climate denier, all the regular tropes that go along with questioning the official narratives. And so there's nothing wrong with questioning at the end of the day. I think we all need a question. We need to question everything every single time, every single day. We need to question our own beliefs because the truth is like that. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but I think the truth is an everlasting journey. You know, I pose a question where if there was some kind of device that could try to diagnose each and one of us. There's 3 of us here in this chat, and let's say this device scanned all 3 of us, and this device could tell how many things that we believed in vehemently are actually true and how many things are false. What would be the percentage of that? Would it be 5% of the things that we actually believe to be true are actually indeed true? Would it be 30%? I highly doubt it would be 60%. I think it's a very low percentage, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
You're talking about realities here.
Yeah.
And then again, now you're into perception of realities. And how would a machine discuss that? I keep thinking about the red pill you said you were taking. And it reminded me that on Tuesday, it's a green pill, Soylent Green. Right? Soylent Green is Tuesday.
Is that Soy Boy Appreciation Day?
Yeah. So I don't know what day they were serving you the red pill. It must have been Sunday they're serving you the red pill. But I know that like Tuesday is green. That's all I know.
Yeah.
That's my reality. That's my truth. You know, whatever you're being fed. And there again, like the perception from one person to another of what is real and what isn't real is another reality in itself.
Yeah.
Right. And now you get from country to country,
religion to religion. I mean, you have these people that call themselves Christians, but if you talk to a Catholic or a Baptist, I mean, radically different belief systems.
Exactly.
Unevangelical. Uh, and you see that even in Judaism, you see that even with Islam. There's different sects that believe in different stuff. And so, and I guess goes back to the whole religion thing. So you have all these competing beliefs and taking a certain verse and translating it in a plethora of different ways. How do you know that your belief system is actually true?
You don't.
You can't. It's just a personal choice when it comes down to it at that point.
Yeah.
Or what we call generally accepted for the society you live in.
And that's where my other skepticism comes in, because I especially during this last quote unquote epidemic, we've seen people just shut up and listen to the consensus. And boy, oh boy, in hindsight, was the consensus wrong each and every turn. So it puts you in a different category. We're like, damn, who do I go with? What do I believe? These guys are lying. Those guys are lying. These guys are lying.
Well, they'll have to come to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just set the standard. Okay, we'll put the fear in. There it is.
Go
right
to
there.
Nexus Online.
If you haven't been reading Nexus, you're just about to. Isn't that how it goes? Yeah.
There are two types of people in the world: those who read Nexus and those who are about to.
Yeah.
If you're about to, you'll find it very interesting. Also, have a look at the book on moon landing.
And I want to clarify, I think I put you in the description, Mr. Allen, as the editor, and you are indeed the publisher, the UK publisher of Nexus Magazine.
That's right. The editor is Duncan Rhodes, who lives in Australia.
Yeah. So I want to clarify that here.
Okay.
I will change it, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. One point I'd like to make about history.
Yes.
History is what we believe happened in the past, recorded by those people who were present when it happened. The last probably 200 years of history, as we understand it, is by and large correct. People have recorded it quite accurately. We've read about it in books, in magazines. We've read about it on television. We see endless documentaries about history. If you go back 500 years, how much of history was recorded? They hadn't invented a printing press at that time. How much was recorded accurately that we can rely on as being an event that occurred, that wasn't changed by the winners? Because history was always written by the winners. If you go back 1,000 years, how much of history that we read about is happening 1,000 years ago can we be sure is 100% correct? There are no records. Paper doesn't last that long. You go back 2,000 years, how much do we know is correct? You go back 5,000 years, all you can rely on is rocks. It's the only thing that survived. Back 10,000 years, forget it. We know nothing. So history, A, is written by the winners, and B, is written to reflect the attitude of the current winners. Who is to say whether the current winners are correct? History is not easily identified. And this is one of the points that Graham Hancock makes very persuasively, that we are a nation with a race with amnesia.
Amnesia, yeah.
So we don't remember it, and we can't remember it. And the reason we can't remember a lot of it, and he's looking for the traces of the civilization that created the world we have today. And he's done a lot of good work in that area. He's a journalist, he writes very well. If something happened to the human race, you mentioned earlier the Younger Dryas. That's about 12,000 years ago from now, about 10,000 BC. If something happened, and it appears that it did, that a fragment of a comet impacted Earth, specifically the North American ice sheet, because there was a lot of ice around at the time. No global warming then, a lot of ice. Excuse me. If something happened that came from space that was going to impact Earth, you would see it coming. If it's big enough, it would make a mark in the sky. If the people who were living then, 12,000 years ago, were aware that something was about to hit Earth, they didn't know necessarily where it was going to hit, but they knew that Earth was going to be hit by a large object moving at very high speed coming from space. They could do nothing about it. When it hit, it was catastrophic. Millions of people would have died, assuming there were millions of people around at the time. It's probably unlikely. Many animals would have disappeared, destroyed. The Earth would have gone through what's known as the nuclear winter, where a lot of dust is thrown up into the atmosphere, blocks out sunlight, so food doesn't grow. If that happened, that is such a catastrophic event that anybody alive who survived the impact and its effects would want to wipe it from their memory because it was so painful. They saw their friends, their neighbors, they almost died themselves. And so you've got this catastrophic event which has a physical effect on the human population, and the only way they can survive is to forget about it and try to do something to keep themselves alive. Humans need certain things to keep themselves alive, water being the most important, drinkable water. So if the human race decided to wipe from their collective memory this impact, which virtually destroyed their world that they could see, because there were no cars around then, there were no trains, they couldn't travel anywhere. So they had to just get on and create their own life from then on. So if we cannot remember it, we cannot remember what happened before that. So maybe what happened before that was the advanced civilization that we keep being told about. And maybe places like the Great Pyramid in Egypt, all the pyramids that are undateable, because you can't date stone, all these things are just remnants of a previous civilization. That's what we're trying to find out. We're trying to regain the memory of what wiped it in the first place. You think we've identified the event, the Younger Dryas event, or the effect of the impact on the North American ice sheet, and there's no crater because it hit the ice. And that's why you can see in the certain parts of Western America, these incredible undulations in the landscape and the effect of water, huge volumes of water melted from the ice cap, traveling across land, heading for the sea. Some of it would have happened in North America, on the West Coast, in Washington State and Oregon, and the evidence exists. Randall Carlson has done amazing work identifying places called the Dry Falls, which are waterfalls, a vast amount of water, makes the Niagara look like a stream. These are dry falls. They still exist. People are beginning to identify some of these things. So if we're a race with amnesia, maybe that's what caused it. And we're now in a point where we can start to look into our history by identifying the objects which remained from prior to that event. And I would say that the pyramids are one such monument remaining from that event. That's why we don't understand it. So we say it's a tomb. That's based on current thinking, not on historical thinking. So the record of history is very sketchy. It's non-existent past about 500 years because there was no means to record it. We didn't have paper and pens to write it down. We certainly didn't have computers. It was oral memory.
Yeah.
And the human memory, the oral history that people recount maybe changed slightly, but it's probably based in fact. So when you hear stories which apply in things like certain oral history of serpents in the sky, could that be the trail of an asteroid? There's a very interesting book written by Immanuel Velikovsky called Worlds in Collision. And he uses a lot of historical evidence. Now, that book was published in, I think, 1954, and it caused such a problem with the current astronomical community that they got it banned. Can you imagine? A book about history being banned because it didn't agree with the current situation. Hi, guys.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. And it was then taken up by a popular publisher. It was published originally by Macmillan, who are an academic publisher. When they had to stop publishing it because of the effects being created by the community to get this thing banned, how could you talk about these things? It was taken up by a popular publisher who publicized it and sold millions of copies. Same thing happened to Eric von Daniken when he published Chariots of the Gods. Oh, he believes in UFOs, does he? Oh, no. Eric von Daniken just asked questions. Could this happen? Is this the way it is? As a result of all the publicity he got, he walked all the way to the bank with large amounts of money, and he's published 40 books since. So he didn't do too badly. And Velikovsky's work is now recognized as being very, not necessarily accurate, but sensible. Immanuel Velikovsky came from Russia originally, via Palestine, as it was then, moved to America, published his books there. So anybody getting cancelled is probably getting close to the truth, which somebody doesn't want to hear. Oh dear. We haven't really advanced very far.
Not very much. And one of the things that I've often said on my show is how really the only history that I believe happened as it was taught to me is that of the Mongolian Empire. And the reason I say that is because the Mongolians didn't have a written history for a long time. So most of the history that we have of the Mongolian Empire is from other empires that were conquered by them.
Yep.
So, and even their family history of the Mongolian Empire is very brief. They don't embellish. You know, there's a famous story of Subutai, I believe, Genghis Khan's famous general, that went on a 2-year excursion to explore the West. He even made it to Poland, Eastern Europe. They were ready to conquer Eastern Europe, and that could have changed the whole trajectory of human history had they done that. But right around that time, Genghis Khan died. So they had to pull back out, go pay their homage, and abort European conquest missions. And I think that's an important piece to human history in general that is overlooked substantially by many historians, by many white supremacists that think white people are superior so much, and they don't take into consideration that it takes luck. It takes lucky breaks. Their lucky break was Genghis Khan dying, because Europe was next on that conquest. And like I stated previously, that could have very well changed history as we know it.
Yeah.
You know, and again, the reason I trust that history over any other history is because they didn't have a written language. It's other hand accounts. We already know that history is written by the winner, and so you're gonna get a certain tale, a certain story told or tailor made for that narrative that that government is trying to spin, and that's what it is with every government. It's not just the Americans, it's not just the British, it's not just any other government. It's every government does it, and that is the only exception. Have you guys dug into the Mongolian Empire?
Not specifically Mongolian Empire. Are you aware of Tartaria?
I am aware of Tartaria, and there's a lot of old world that gets connected to Tartaria.
Yep. And there's free energy involved as well. Well, 0 point energy, I think we should refer to it.
Are you okay, Marcus? I don't want to keep you on too long. I just want to make sure you're okay.
No, I'm going to have to. It's 2:00 in the morning over here.
Yeah.
Which is fine. So maybe I should call it a day and get some sleep because I've got something on tomorrow as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun. I feel like we could go on for hours.
You guys have been on for what, 5 hours now?
Almost 6.
Almost
6.
Because I'm on here for over 2, and it just struck me that it's my God. I didn't
even realize
here,
it,
and
so my
I just
apologies.
sent you that, and I went. I think the man should be running for Prime Minister of England at 84 years old.
Yeah. No, I didn't even think. I was completely unaware that it was 2 a.m. in the UK, and then Scott messaged me. I'm like, holy shit! I better. I mean, this is the kind of conversations that just fly by, and it didn't feel like 6 hours. It felt like maybe 2 hours at most. It's been amazing.
Certain things you mentioned set me off because guess what? When you've lived 80 odd years, you accumulate a lot of information. So if there's any secret to wisdom, it's live for a while.
You see, the biggest thing everybody needs to get is the fact that Marcus said history is recorded by the winners. So they must listen to us because we are the winners.
Absolutely.
Okay, and these recordings that we're doing are creating the history.
Yep, that's a good point. I mean, the chats we have on the Apollo Detectives, by the way, YouTube shows the Apollo Detectives. Just go and have a look. We've been doing it for what, 5-6 years now? Just
2019. That's when we uploaded and started on that particular channel that Robert has. That was 2019. It was there before, got taken down, and now it's put back up. And we've been doing weekly recordings ever since.
Yeah. Which
to record the history.
Yes. Yeah. Which is what we do. I mean, there's no set agenda. We just take a subject, discuss it, look at it, produce information. Robert illustrates it very well on the films. And he edits it down to about 30 minutes per episode. But there's a lot of information there. Now, whether
everybody on is a winner, and that's all they need to know.
I absolutely love your videos, and this is my personal, for my audience, it's scientifically based. So it's not conjecture, it's not anecdotal, it's using maths and science.
Yeah.
And it goes against the grains that we have been brought up in to believe, indoctrinated since we were kids. Our kids are going through this nonsense, and their kids will go through this nonsense unless we put a stop into it. And so I can attest, I'm a big fan of the Apollo Detectives. Link is in the description as well. So check them out. I strongly encourage you to check them out. Their conversations are fascinating, especially this is one of my personal favorite rabbit holes, the whole moon landing. There's many rabbit holes. Marcus and I hit a few of them in these 6 hours, but the moon landing is definitely one of my favorite, maybe my personal favorite ones.
There it is.
Moon rock.
Yeah, let's get her on eBay.
Film.
Yeah.
Film. That's what they use. Film. And
Come get it. Come on. Come on.
Yeah, experiments that you and Robert did, and we all did, and it's written up on the Owlis website,
Yep.
demonstrates a photographic film is destroyed in a vacuum. End of story. End of moon landings. Now, I'm sure the people will disagree with that, but you've got to prove it with evidence, hard, factual, repeatable evidence, not wishful thinking. We've had too much wishful thinking, belief in authority, use of science in a wrong way, because science can be used for good or for evil. You've got to use science in the best way, and that hopefully is what we do. So, as I've said many times before, no human has ever flown to, landed on, walked across, collected rocks, and returned to Earth. No human. Unmanned craft, yes. Or should I say unpersoned craft? Because I'm sure that ladies will go to the moon one day, not yet. But no human has yet landed on the lunar surface. So let's ignore, let's just get that straight. If you don't agree with me, prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong.
Come on, come get it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who will be listening who will say, he's wrong. Of course we landed on the moon. I saw it on television. We all saw it on television. I saw it on television.
I don't think a lot of people will, Mr. Marcus. Luckily, a lot of the people that listen to my idiot ass, they do not believe in the moon landings. So they are seeking wisdom from yourself, from Scott, and they are trying to further their knowledge in how to deal with people that actually believe in this myth. So
ignore them. Forget about it. They're not important. There are many better things to do. Let's get 0 point energy working. Let's get it in public. Let's do it. That will help so much. Let's have a look at some of the other areas we've discussed today. Correct history. Let's all be winners so we can write our own history correctly.
Right.
Or don't do it digitally, because when this supernova comes along, all the solar particle events occur, all the solar flares come, it'll destroy the computers. So put it on paper, print it out.
Carve it in stone.
Carve it in stone. That'll last forever.
Yes.
Carve it into stone.
Then you're a winner.
Then you're a winner. Anyway,
chicken dinner.
Carve it in stone.
I'm pleased. I think it's time I went to bed now.
Yeah,
I think so, sir. It's always a pleasure.
I have your Allis website, your Nexus website, any other links you want to leave with us before we finish this?
Jarrah White's website. Jarrah White, who does a lot of films about the moon landings. Moonfaker.com. So you know where he's coming from. I've
had Jarrah on a couple of times. One to discuss the moon landings, one to debate conspiracies. That was a lot of fun. But I like Jarrah. He's very technical, very, very smart kid for sure.
Yeah, he is. So thank you very much, Weezy.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I hope we do it again. And I mean, this flew by so quick. I honestly I was like, holy smokes, until Scott sent me that message. I'm like, holy shit, we are at 6 hours.
Yeah, that's good. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to have to break this up into 2 parts, so 1 and 2. So thank you so much, Mr. Marcus. I hope you get some sleep. I hope you have a fabulous Sunday. I hope you get some rest. I'm sorry I kept you up so long.
No, don't worry about it. I enjoy doing it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I enjoyed this very much.
We'll have to do it again soon.
Let's do it. I'll message each of you individually. Let's see when we can get together. Maybe do it an hour earlier, so we're not up so late. But I don't mind these late, long podcasts. you would be surprised. You know, Dr. Raza thinks that people don't want to listen to these long shows. And I told Dr. Raza, you'd be surprised. The people that listen to me want to listen to 2 hours, 3 hours, 4, 6 hour podcasts.
Yeah.
My listeners will listen to every minute of these 6 hours. I guarantee you that. And so there's people that actually do. I mean, there's people that will listen to 30-second TikTok videos, but there's people that want to listen to a full context conversation exploring a plethora of different topics. And this is what we accomplished today. And I think people will highly, highly enjoy this conversation at the end of the day.
Oh, just one other point you could include, the website unchartedx.com. It's run by Ben Van Kerkwyk, and he looks into a lot of these ancient mysteries. That's what he does. Unchartedx.com. It's worth putting up there. And Chris Dunn as well, Christopher Dunn.
Yeah.
I don't recall his website exactly, but he's got a website. But his
is he the guy behind Earth Ancients?
All of this is on the technology of Egypt for sure.
Yeah.
Particularly the absolute incredible pieces and the accuracy of them. The Uncharted X goes through in great detail on it.
Yeah. And
worth watching. For anybody to watch. You don't have to be anything. Just watch it.
Yeah, just watch it.
Yeah, because he's the guy who filmed the examination of the granite vases, the 5,000-year-old granite vases, which are created to the same specification as an aircraft engine. So did they use computers back then to do it? I don't know. Did they have lathes? The only way they could do it is have a lathe. Anyway, Uncharted X, good site, worth looking at.
I'm definitely going to be checking that out for sure. Yeah.
Check it. Oh, it's worth checking out. He's a good guy, Ben. Does some good work. And he's very computer savvy as well. That's what his job was before he.
Maybe we could have him on the next time we do this. That'd be
go for it.
That would be fun. Yeah.
Anyway,
sure.
It's love you and leave you guys. Thank you very much indeed.
Hey,
look forward to.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus Allen, and thank you, Mr. Scott. Thank you both, you fine gentlemen. You and I have your link in the description, so hopefully everyone follows there. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your weekend. Have a good evening.
Good night, sir.
All right. Yes, sir.
You take care. Bye-bye.